When I put the poll out, I wasn't sure which video idea would win, and I certainly didn't think it'd be this one. At one point, Avengers as Xenomorphs was taking the lead, and I started planning out the episode. However, you want to see more monstrous versions of the Amphibia characters. With that said, let's bring these illustrations to life. Finally, I found a way to charge my phone and record a video diary. I can't believe it. I'm in another world. It's freaky and super cool and super scary as well. Well, there are super strange creatures, monsters as there were, or whatever you want to call them, and they exist here. I came across what looked like a town with, well, a farm on it. Thinking nothing of it, I went to the farm and, it looked a bit run down. It was some kind of shelter. I was hoping to find anybody who could help me, but nobody was there. And, I'm stranded in this place, so I made myself at home. I never should have opened that strange looking chest though. It had some cool gems on the top of it and a rather interesting design. So I opened it up and the next thing I knew, there's blinding light. When I could see again, I was in this strange wood in the middle of nowhere. And there was a sign saying Wartwood. I mean, I've never heard of this place before. And as you can imagine, a strange name like that on a sign, I was, wasn't sure what I was going to run into. But I'm in the middle of nowhere in a strange place and there's what might be a town down there. I'm gonna go and check it out. But I never imagined that this place would be filled with monsters. It seems like it ended some hellish nightmare. How's the best way to describe this until I capture one on camera for you to see? Assuming I get out this place and someone sees it, or maybe someone gets stuck here and finds this recording. Well, how should I start? Where should I start? Okay, I guess the first creature I came across resembles a tadpole. The small, earlier form of a frog, with a tail. A couple of limbs sometimes, and they're tiny, they're harmless in our world. Well, they're not harmless here. It's like a mutated version of a tadpole or something, think the Hulk and a nuclear blast going off. Some strange abomination like you'd find in that series on TV. This tadpole, at least I think it was gigantic. It was as big as a house and, well, I think it was a girl. It was pink. I know in this day and age, you can't assume its gender, but it had a yellow bow on the top of its head. And like the Hulk, this creature had incredible strength. Also, an impressive and dangerous ability to mimic the voice and sounds of anything it hears. One time, I saw it rolling around like a giant pink boulder, destroying the landscape as it sped around, leaving large crater-like trails. When suddenly, a rather large bird-like creature tried to attack this giant tadpole. It let out a supersonic scream that knocked its opponent out literally cold. It was unconscious before it rolled up and began to devour it. Yeah, it ate it live. It was disgusting. While it was devouring this rather large meal, it began to glow blue and orange with a kind of like the veins showing that colour all over its body. And it started to glow super bright. There was visible signs of electricity that could be seen in the air around this monster. The strangest attack, however, was the most disgusting thing I have ever seen. This creature was not only monstrous in size and appearance, but it appeared to enjoy causing destruction by leaning back and spitting a giant, for lack of anything else to describe this in a less disgusting way, loogie. Yeah, that's right, a giant loogie. It's completely disgusting. Although the range was impressive. This thing managed to make it fly several kilometers, I guess. I don't know the distance, it just went for miles. And then it came crashing down like a giant tsunami from the sky, causing absolute destruction to anything in its wake. I wouldn't be surprised if a few towns or villages were wiped out by this thing. Thankfully though, it seemed to not have any interest in destroying Wartwood. At first I thought this was because I was super lucky and maybe there was something special about this place and the old farm. And then I saw it. One night I was in the farmhouse, I heard a rumbling sound and it woke me up. I looked out the window and I could see this creature heading towards a rather large barn structure at the bottom of the farm. That's when it hit me. That's when I knew I was in trouble. And I might need to find somewhere else for a shelter and for my survival. This farm, That's right. This farm and that barn, it was this creature's home. Does that mean there were more out there and they could come back at any time? Had I just been counting the days unknowingly until my luck had run out? I headed back to the basement, where I set up a little shelter in this place and quietly got my stuff together after watching the barn for what seemed like hours and hours. I was sure this thing was asleep, or at least busy enough for me to sneak out the back of the farmhouse as quietly as I could. I headed further into the town area, not sure what I might encounter, but whatever it was, surely it couldn't be any worse than this thing. This giant pink tadpole-like creature. As I left, I saw a name on the farmhouse gate. It said Planter. Not sure if this was the creature's family name or the name of the victims from it, but I decided to call this creature the Great Loogie Monster of Planter's Farm. A bit of a mouthful, but at this point I decided I needed something to help me remember a place and a location and what was there. It would have been, nicer to have a cooler name, like the Pink Loogie Zapper. Although, that does have a nice ring to it. As you might expect, the Pink Loogie Zapper was not the only monster I came across. I managed to find a small house on the outskirts of Wartwood that seemed to be safe from, well, the Pink Loogie Zapper, and away from the town's view. I figured it was safer to hold up here, somewhere near the creature and town, so I wouldn't get destroyed, but also somewhere out of sight from the town in case anyone or creature came back. And it was perfect. It was a great setup, and I didn't need to go far for supplies or anything to start with. That was until my supply of food from the town ran out. Yes, that left me with quite the predicament. I had no option but to venture out into the woods to find something to eat, and as disgusting as it was, the forest had an abundance of strange and bizarre creatures that were small enough, and with a bit of effort, I could easily kill them for food. Sometimes some resourcefulness was needed, but I had a food supply. The taste of these wasn't too bad, but the smell, the smell even when they were cooked. Some of these things, it's going to take some getting used to. I also had to be careful about cooking the meat of these creatures. I set up an area in the woods, a little trek away from the hut. I didn't want to attract anything that smelt the meat cooking over the fire. Thankfully, as luck would have it, so far, there's been no issue. Well, I spoke too soon. There was one issue. A rather large lizard-like creature. No idea what it really was, but it seemed to have some form of armour on it, and what looked like two retractable metal claws on its front limbs. Reminded me of Wolverine in a way. It's got the two claws that shoot out of the, kind of like, the hands. Well, it was kind of like that. They were retractable metal type claws. This giant lizard also had pinkish skin with a lighter underbelly and a dark spot-like pattern over its body. I think it had hair. I'm not too sure if it was male or female, but it had armour on its chest, shoulders, front legs, and part of the back legs. I'm not gonna lie, it did look kind of cool, but at the same time, it looked odd to see a giant lizard wearing armour. And truth be told, I couldn't just sit there as it ate the meat I was cooking. I mean, there was nothing I could do but to stay hidden and wait for it to move. But currently I don't have the resources to handle this type of thing and its armour. Like I was saying, this thing ate my food, and when it was done, it curled up by the fire pit and was just hanging out. Perhaps it was waiting for me to return with more meat for it to eat, or maybe it was hoping it could have me as the next meal. Not gonna happen, let me tell you, I'm not gonna be monster food. I decided it'd be best to take the food I had stocked up, stored away, and check back in a day or two. Lo and behold, what did I find? This lizard-like creature was still there. I think it was just roaming around the fire pit, scavenging for food still. I spent hours trying to figure out a way to deal with this thing. And then it hit me. Maybe I could get this lizard and the Pink Loogie Zapper to deal with each other. Maybe get them to fight, and if I'm lucky, they'll both be taken care of. So I decided that, this could also allow me to cook some food and scout further into the area if I can get rid of this lizard. I had a plan, a crude plan, a really basic crude plan. It needed a bit of work, but had a basic plan. And that was to get these two monsters to fight each other. It'd be awesome to watch, but once I was sure they were going at it, I was planning to head off and do the rest of what I had planned. Sort some food being cooked, get out of there, scout the area, come back later, see what happened. But there was one problem. I could only try this once. I only had enough food to try this once. If it failed, and the lizard didn't fight the pink loogie zapper, then I wouldn't be able to try this a second time. And to be honest, if I did try it a second time, I'm not sure the same trick would work. It was all or nothing. And if this failed, I may end up as a lizard or zapper chow. So I watched them both. I watched them both until I was sure I could get the lizard to the zapper with a trail of food. I waited until the zapper was asleep, and I made a trail of meat from the barn to where the lizard was at the fire pit. Come to think of it, most of these giant beasts are pink. I did think were all the monsters in this place giant and pink, and when they reach a certain size, it's just something that happens with the creatures here, or was it just random? Random luck that I happened to find two giant monsters that were pink. So I placed the trail as close as I could get to the sleeping lizard. I wanted to follow the saying, let sleeping dogs lie, but I had only one shelter set up and I needed to sort out a food supply. My survival hinged on getting rid of this lizard. I couldn't leave it there asleep, I had to. So, I could have made another pit elsewhere, but what happens if another lizard or creature comes there? Then I'm starting to be surrounded by giant creatures in this town with no food supply. And believe you me, that is not something I wanted to happen. Once I was as close as I could get to the lizard, I threw the last piece of meat in front of its face, and I hid. I've never run so fast in my life. It took a few moments, but my plan seemed to work. Once the lizard got the scent of the meat, it opened its eyes and began to follow the trail, eating each piece as it went along. I watched and followed from a distance, making sure to stay behind the creature and as well hidden as I could be. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to end up as a lizard chow. It slowly made its way to the farm and then towards the barn. Time seemed to stand still though. As it got to the farm, it stopped, almost as if it could sense danger of some form or a threat ahead of it. This was until its hunger and greed got the better of it, and it began to eat the meat and head closer to the barn. It was so engrossed in the meat that it failed to notice the pink loogie zapper was now following the trail from the other side, eating the meat as it went along. Then, as the two giant beasts got closer and closer, they finally made eye contact. The eyes of the two giant monsters met as they stood there motionless. So at this point, I was actually hoping they weren't friends or had a mutual respect and cooperated with each other, both being giant and pink creatures. Before I finished the thought though, the pink loogie zapper screamed at the lizard, sending it flying backwards. The lizard shook it off and got back up before growling at its opponent and charging at it with a speed that was faster than anything else I'd seen. That was when the pink loogie zapper rolled up into a ball and it also sped towards its opponent. They both charged head on, colliding with a massive impact. It caused the ground to shake. You could feel the impact in the air. I was frozen in awe at this battle and completely forgot about getting out of there to carry out the rest of my plan. Now, you might think that was a foolish thing to do, but you have to understand that everybody wants to watch two giant monsters fight. Think about it, Godzilla versus Kong. You just want to watch it. And I wasn't right up in the middle of the fight, so I was a bit of a safe distance away. It seemed like the perfect chance to watch a monster battle in action. That said, I was still close enough for bits of the debris and flying trees, as well as the force of these two colossal monsters, to be felt in the air and to go flying past me. The fight was pretty much even at first, and both looked like they weren't going to give an inch, until the loogie sapper sent an electrical blast at the lizard. Now, this probably wouldn't have affected the lizard too much. Well, if it wasn't wearing its armor, it probably wouldn't have, but the metal armor meant that this lizard lit up like a Christmas tree. I could smell the burnt flesh in the air, and what do you know? It smelled like chicken. My mouth began to water, and I did hope that I could get some of it to cook later if it lost the battle. But while the lizard was dazed and confused, the loogie zapper. I'm calling it that because saying the whole name over and over, well, it's boring and a bit of a mouthful. So the loogie zapper grabbed the lizard and threw it up in the air towards a house at the edge of the town. A house I didn't fancy checking out as it looked too creepy. You know when you have that sense of impending doom, where you pass somewhere and you just got the sense if you go there, you're not coming back. That was the only place in town I had that, and there's no way I was going in there. I stayed clear of that place. But the lizard came crashing down in the front of this large house. And when the dust settled, the lizard let out a cry as if it was in pain, as it was thrown out from inside of the house by a large bluish hand covered in warts and bumps. I just watched in terror while thinking, I am so glad I did not go in there. I would have been dead in seconds. There is no way I'm going in that place. As I looked at the hand slowly coming back into the wreckage of the house, I saw what looked like the hair from the lizard. The dust cleared and I could see a long pinkish purple hair, kind of looking like a plant to be honest. A single red and yellow glowing eye from underneath this plant-like hair, and a large menacing grin with a long tongue that had a second mouth on it. And the best way to describe it, you know those aliens from the Alien films? Their second mouth? It looked like one of those on the end of the tongue. It was creepy. It sent a shiver down my spine. I just prayed it didn't have acid for blood as well. It was dressed in rather tattered cloth and sat on a giant cauldron with, well, green smoke coming out of it that looked like an evil face. And I swear, I'm not joking, I swear I could see floating green skulls around the air of the cauldron. But if I saw that, that means maybe magic's real. Maybe that's how I got to this world. But great, now there's magic to deal with. I might be doomed. This thing had a straw doll in its hand, which kind of confused me. And it attached the hair from the lizard before snapping a trunk of a tree in half, splintering it and having what looked like a giant stake. It used the tree trunk to scratch a line down the eye of the doll. Just then, the lizard cried out in pain and put its front limb over its eye. When it put the foot down, a scar had appeared on the same eye that had been scraped by the doll. Yep, magic was real. This was all the proof that I needed. I'm not sure what to do at this point. I watched as this bluish humanoid frog monster covered in bumps and warts took the doll and squeezed it in its hand, causing the pink lizard to collapse while gasping for air before it, well, died. This creature had killed the giant lizard that I was hiding from with just a few bits of hair and little to no effort at all. It was enough to make me drop to my knees in fear. I mean, my legs refused to move. I watched in terror. This creature then looked at the loogie zapper and threw a pouch of God knows what. It hit the loogie zapper and kind of a magic dust cloud appeared. I don't know what else to call it. It was kind of like a cloud, almost like flour, but sparkly. Once it cleared, the loogie zapper was tiny. I mean, tiny. It was probably just as strong as before, judging by how it went off towards the barn, stomping and destroying the place. But it was now the size of a football. I mean, this thing went from as big as a house to kind of a small, ugly but cute baby football. It's the best way I could describe it. Although, I wasn't about to get too close to it. When I turned my attention back to where the bluish creature came from, it was gone. The house was empty and the cauldron, well, it looked like it hadn't been used. As you can imagine, I was frozen in fear and unable to move. The loogie zapper had gone back to the farm, destroying anything in its way. I don't know how long had passed, but eventually I was able to move. I went to the lizard creature and threw a stone at it. Sure enough, it was dead. It didn't move an inch. My stomach rumbled with hunger, so I carved off some of the lizard's leg and took it back to the fire pit to cook it. I have to say, it did taste like chicken. One thing still puzzled me though. I felt like I was being watched the whole time, but there was nothing there. Even worse, I had no clue where this blue creature had gone. But since the madness and magic cloud of flowers stuck in my mind, I call this creature the Madness Flower Witch. Would you like to see more Amphibia characters as monsters? Maybe we could do something with Our House or Gravity Falls. Let me know your ideas and suggestions in the comments below. Monday is going to be a live stream where we continue our Ben 10 heroine illustration, where we're taking Ditto and turning it into a female superhero character. That's it for today's video, except I wanted to give a bit of pro artist advice to all those aspiring artists out there, and maybe a reminder for those who already do art, whether you're professional or you just do it as a hobby. And that is to trust the process. Many times we start a piece of art and we get so far through it before looking at it and thinking, this doesn't look right, or someone might say, what are you drawing? And when you look at it, you kind of lose motivation before you realize it and you don't want to continue the piece. Well, trust the process. Take a step back, come back to it later, but I strongly advise you to continue with the process and at least attempt to finish the piece off. There are many times when I've been doing these illustrations and they look really weird at certain stages of the design process. But when I've continued with them and I've applied all the techniques I know over the top, or I've pushed myself to finish off the artwork, some of it's come out to be my best piece of art on the channel. Maybe you'll surprise yourselves. You'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. I hope that's inspiring to somebody out there and really helpful. Anyway, stay safe everybody. Catch you next time.